Somebody should ask Speaker Mike Johnson, why did he recess Congress early so that he didn't have to deal with the Epstein issue? He can bring this to the floor at any point. You know, the American people deserve this, regardless of what the political ramifications are for the Speaker.
So Thomas Massie will not let the Epstein story die. He won't let the cover-up continue, whether it comes from the White House or Congress and the Speaker Mike Johnson. He is proposing a method to force the release of the Epstein Files regardless of what Trump and Mike Johnson are trying to do. And here on NBC, he explains what he plans to do in that regard to divulge the truth to the American public. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Congressman Massie, let me turn to you. What say you? Are you being hypocritical by demanding this now and not sooner?
No, not at all. Look, the release of the Epstein Files is emblematic of what Trump ran for and why he got the populist vote. There seems to be a class of people beyond the law, beyond the judicial system, that operates outside of all of that. And we all thought that when Trump was elected, he would be the bull in the china shop and that he would break that up and bring transparency. Frankly, it wasn't until just recently that I realized that people who were allegedly working on this weren't sincere in their efforts. And also, politics is the art of the doable. There's enough public pressure right now that we can get 218 votes and force this to a vote on the floor. Somebody should ask Speaker Mike Johnson, why did he recess Congress early so that he didn't have to deal with the Epstein issue? He can bring this to the floor at any point, yet he's chosen to send us home early for August recess.
Yeah, no doubt. Actually, Mike Johnson, when questioned about, well, if there's nothing to hide in the Epstein files or the Epstein investigation, the materials that the Trump administration promised to divulge to the public, why not just divulge it and let the American people decide whether it's a Democratic hoax, as Trump ridiculously suggested, or if there's something there? And he said, hey, you know, I don't want to create division. It was just this insane deflection answer. But guess what? That's divisive. When you're covering for a child sex trafficking ring that likely had connections to a foreign intelligence agency, maybe Mossad, that's a problem. That's pretty darn divisive. And guess what? I don't particularly care how divisive it is when you unveil information regarding such criminal behavior. You know, that is the natural thing that would follow if prominent people are associated with Epstein, which many of them were, clearly.
Well, Congressman Massie, let me delve into this with you. We will get to Johnson in just a moment. The Department of Justice says they will not be releasing further Epstein material in order to protect what they say is more than 1,000 victims, many of whom were underage. I want to read you a little bit of a DOJ memo which writes, quote, sensitive information relating to these victims is intertwined throughout the materials. One of our highest priorities is combating child exploitation and bringing justice to victims. Perpetuating unfounded theories about Epstein serves neither one of those ends. What is your response to the concern that releasing these files could ultimately hurt the victims, Congressman Massie?
Well, look, that's a straw man. Roe and I carefully crafted this legislation so that the victims' names will be redacted and that no child pornography will be released. So they're hiding behind that. We're trying to get justice for the victims and transparency for America. And so, you know, we've redacted things before. We don't want to hurt the victims. We're doing this for the victims. I think it's just something that they're hiding behind. And at the end of that statement, I heard something about conspiracy theories or something like that. Look, they're the ones, it's the president's own attorney general, FBI director, and children who said that, and vice president, who said that these files need to be released. We're just trying to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea that the victims don't want justice for these crimes is absurd, and they don't want to divulge this to the public and show, hey, what criminal enterprise this truly was, which prominent people were involved, which intelligence services this was connected to. He's right, redactions can happen. The overwhelming American populace that wants to get to the bottom of this Epstein story and the vile nature of these crimes is not saying, hey, we want the victims exploited, we want to see full lists of the victims. That's insane. We want information regarding the clients. This was a child sex trafficking ring, involving some of the most prominent people in power in the world, not only in the political realm, but also in the lobbying realm and the legal realm. You have, lots of people, being accused and had close associations with Epstein. Many of them probably were unaware of his criminal behavior, but many of them were probably involved in this crazy, sex ring, this sex trafficking ring that, the Trump administration went beyond their own means to say, hey, we're going to bring transparency once Trump gets in office, and he certainly hasn't done that. So yeah, I'm with Massie and Ro Khanna on this bill, regardless of what Mike Johnson and Trump wants to do, because they've gone through several phases of the gaslighting, from, mocking Trump supporters that still want to get to the bottom of this, to calling it a Democratic hoax, to saying, I can't believe you're asking about Epstein when there was this storm in Texas the other day. They're trying everything under the sun to get away from this, and that's why right now we need to keep talking about this. Whenever they get into this propaganda campaign to steer you to other issues, that's when they're hiding something. That's what we're seeing.
Well, Congressman Khanna, take another piece of this. Based on what you are proposing in this legislation, the names of, frankly, anyone who flew on Jeffrey Epstein's planes or visited any of his properties, anyone named in the files who was not a victim, will likely be publicly released if these files are released. Is it fair to release files that may never see their day in court, but could be devastating, quite frankly, to the people mentioned in them?
Ghislaine, it's a fair question, but I want to just focus first on the victims. Bradley Edwards, who's the lawyer for the victims, has demanded a full release of the files, obviously with the victims' names redacted. He said the Justice Department has never cared about the victims, about centering the victims. They gave Jeffrey Epstein the plea deal the first time. They never cared about victims' rights, and no one has asked the victims what they want. They do want these files released for closure and for healing.
Yeah, he's right about the first plea deal. They didn't exactly care about the victims. They had 40 plus witnesses that attested that Epstein had lured them into his presence for massages and then sexually abused them. And he got that sweetheart deal where he served, 13 months with a work release program where he got out 6 days of the week for 12 hours. He had his own wing of the sheriff's department carved out for him. He got to travel between properties internationally while he was being punished. They basically treated him like a king. So yeah, they didn't care about the victims then. They don't care about them now too, because many of them want to get to the bottom of this. Same with lawyers, even Epstein's lawyer. Even Dershowitz has come out and said, hey, there is clients, and I've seen things related to a client list, and I can't divulge it because of client attorney privilege or whatever he said about it. But he doesn't think that they have answers either. And he doesn't even believe that Epstein killed himself either. This is Epstein's lawyer. And Michael Baden, the forensic analyst, who's probably the most prominent in the world, investigated Epstein's body and came to the same conclusion. So there's lots of questions on many sides of this issues. It's not just the American public, it's the victims, and a lot of the victims have driven this whole thing. Virginia Giuffre Roberts drove it before she died too.
Now, there's a reason the Justice Department usually doesn't release information before charging people, and I understand the sensitivity of that. But in this case, given that this has created a trust in our very government itself, given people feel that the rich and the powerful have been not held accountable, that they have a different set of rules, and that there may be government officials involved, that possibly could be foreign government involved, business involved, financial fraud involved, the president should say, I ran on this, the Attorney General promised this, we're going to do a clean, full release. And I think the American people are fair. They're going to be able to distinguish between someone who got a grant from Jeffrey Epstein to do cancer research versus rich and powerful men who were abusing underage girls.
Absolutely. That's the truth. If you have study and eyes on these documents, Americans are going to be able to discern between who was involved in the crimes and who wasn't. Jeffrey Epstein did give a lot of money to charitable causes. He also laundered a lot of money. We know that. And Americans can sift through that information. We're not as stupid as the Trump administration is pretending. And don't get me wrong, the Democrats were wrong too. They didn't even touch this whole thing. And by the way, when the Washington regime came out and said, hey, the charges against Trump in this Russia collusion activity, proves that no one's above the law. That was a total farce. And this is showing that completely. You're not going to get any prosecutions, it looks like, out of the Epstein case, because they're not going to release any information that might lead to clamor for that. And they're not going to prosecute anyone related to the Russiagate hoax. Not Obama, not Comey, not Brennan, not Clapper. So you're seeing that whole line that no one's above the law is a farce. So Kana's right. There is two tiers of justice, one for the cover-up crowd and one for Americans that get caught up in things that the feds hate, a lot of which is victimless.
Congressman Massie, I do want to go back to the fact that the House was adjourned early. House Speaker Mike Johnson has defended that decision. He says, look, the White House is already pushing for the release of the grand jury materials. Obviously, that's been held up in court. He's accusing you of trying to inflict political pain on your party by criticizing him for adjourning the House early. Is he right? Are you trying to inflict political pain with this criticism?
I don't know why it should be politically painful to be transparent. Is the pain he's talking about that somebody in our party will be embarrassed by those files? Then that's not a good excuse. Is the pain he's talking about is that the legislators, when they vote, have to pick between protecting embarrassment of the rich and powerful versus getting justice for victims? I don't really understand what he means by that. Why is it painful for Mike Johnson to call a vote on this? And it's, the American people deserve this, regardless of what the political ramifications are for the speaker.
Totally. If this is painful for certain criminals in Washington involved in this vile behavior, I don't care. I don't care who the political beneficiary of this entire thing is. I know a lot of Democrats are opportunistic, only talking about this now. Some aren't. Some, like Ron Wyden, have talked about this for quite some time and said, hey, there's a $1.5 billion in wire transfers between Epstein and prominent people. That's being withheld. We can disclose that if we vote on it. And he's not getting much support for that either. This is a grand bipartisan cover-up. You're seeing it from both circles. Democrats, in many regards, are taking advantage of this now. But I don't care who gets the political high ground over this. I care about exposing the lunacy, the madness, the criminality, and the connections to intelligence services that this blackmail operation was apparently connected to. That's what Americans deserve to know. That's what Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi talked about endlessly. So, hey, I'm with Massie and I'm with Ro Khanna on this plan. Force the hand of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, even though he's a clear Trump lackey that just wants to bury this thing, as Trump clearly does. The American people don't have to accept that. So this is a great plan. I support it 100%. Do I think it's going to happen? No, because Washington is a grand cover-up machine. But at the same time, I have to commend these two gentlemen for pushing this, and they do have some support for it.
Well, let's talk about Ghislaine Maxwell now. Of course, she sat for 2 days of interviews with DOJ officials. President Trump was asked, does he want to pardon her? He said he hasn't thought about it, but he's allowed to do it. Congressman Massie, first to you, would you support a pardon or commutation of Ghislaine Maxwell?
That would be up to the president, but if she has information that could help us, then I think she should testify. Let's get that out there. And whatever they need to do to compel that testimony, as long as it's truthful, I would be in favor of.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with him here. I would be against any pardon. I might support a reduction in sentencing if she reveals and divulges Epstein's clients and connections to intelligence services, etc. I think that's utopian to think that'll be spilled out, that'll come out. I don't think that would be publicly broadcast, but I think the victim should weigh into this too, obviously, because she was deeply involved in this absurd crime, like this crime against humanity. There's basically nothing worse than destroying the innocence of children. And she was involved in that deeply. By all accounts, there's no question about her involvement in it, and especially in recruiting the women that were brought to Epstein. So pardoning it, I don't think that she'll get a pardon. There's a lot of things that Trump has done that's gone way over the line in terms of decency. I think in regard to spending and rearming Ukraine and starting a new war in Iran and bombing Yemen. and dragging Massie for having the gall to talk about spending and talk about divulging the Epstein files. But I don't think Trump's going to do that. I think that would, he's already sinking a lot with his base here. That would totally destroy it, I think, if he pardons Maxwell. But let me know what you think about that in the comments.
Well, Congressman Khanna, I mean, look at her record. Convicted of sex trafficking of a minor, sex trafficking conspiracy. The list goes on and on. Do you think Ghislaine Maxwell should be pardoned or have a commutation of her sentence, her 20-year sentence?
No, I don't, and I'm concerned that the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, is meeting with her supposedly one-on-one. Look, I agree with Congressman Massie that she should testify, but she's been indicted twice on perjury. This is why we need the files. This is why we need independent evidence. But by the way, the only person who suffered political pain in this whole thing is Congressman Thomas Massie for telling the truth. He's got the president's entire team who got the president reelected coming down on him in his district, and it's just made him stronger.
Yeah, that's one of the things we love best about Thomas Massie is he dares to speak the truth and stand on principles even when it's most unpopular. With his own party, with his own political circles, etc. He's done this more than once. He's done it on spending. He's done it on war with Iran, calling that out as an unconstitutional, not only blunder, but severe mistake. He's dragged Trump for doing that, and in return, he gets dragged by Trump, but he doesn't care because he's the Ron Paul of our time. He's the Cato the Younger of our time. He cares about principle and true America First principles upon which that the president supposedly stood during the campaign trail, but now while in power, not so much. So I have to agree with Khanna there too.
Well, Congressman Khanna, I have to ask you, politically speaking, the implication for Democrats, there has been a lot of focus by yourself, by other Democrats on this issue of Jeffrey Epstein. Prior to this, you all were talking about the so-called big, beautiful bill, the fact that the CBO had estimated, for example, some 10 million people could be kicked off of their health care. Are you concerned that by focusing on Epstein, you could overshadow Democrats' message on pocketbook issues and hurt your chances in the midterms?
No, I'm not. Look, my core conviction is a new economic patriotism to reindustrialize America, a 21st century Marshall Plan for America, Medicare for all, opposing the Medicaid cuts. But you can't do anything constructive with government if you don't have trust in government. This is about trust in government. When John F. Kennedy was president, trust in government was 60%. Today, it's in the teens. Congressman Johnson and I, Speaker Johnson and I came to Congress together. He was on the reform side, too. He wanted to make government work. This is a perfect opportunity for him to say, look, the past is a past. Okay, I didn't love that he shut down government. Maybe on your show today, he'll commit that when we come back, let's have a vote. Remind him of what we were like, the conversations we had in our freshman class. This is about being a reform agent of transparency.
Yeah, you know what? Me and Ro Khanna have very different visions economically and as far as domestic policy goes. There's no question about that. I'm a hardcore libertarian. I don't believe in expanding the entitlement state. And by the way, the Republicans aren't going to cut the entitlement state. That's just absurd. They won't even take money out of USAID after they've dismantled that organization. And they proved that by extending and passing the Biden era CR. So no one's coming for your Social Security. I'm sorry to say no one's coming for your Medicaid, to replace it with charitable like mutual aid organizations that existed prior to the current socialist entitlement state that were very successful. But I won't dwell on that because one of the things he said there that I think he was totally right on is you can't even get into domestic policy and make it successful and make it pass muster when it comes to the American public if they don't have trust in government. And he's right. There's no trust in government right now. Regardless of who gets in power, you're seeing distrust levels as high as they've ever been in government. And sure, Trump had a cult of personality behind him walking into office, just like Obama did, still has that to some extent. But situations like this and stories like this are only amplifying the distrust that we see in Washington. So while I might disagree with Khanna in many regards, certainly do, I think he's totally right about that.
Very quickly, before I let you both go, first, Congressman Massie, to you, will this pass? Will it come to the floor and pass the House when you return from August recess?
Well, I hope it does because, the question you asked, Roe, this is going to hurt Republicans in the midterms. The voters will be apathetic if we don't hold the rich and powerful accountable. I think when we get back, we can get the signatures required to force this to the floor. Speaker Mike Johnson should do the right thing and just bring it to the floor and not require us to force it. And he'll have a choice once we get those 218 signatures. Is he going to try and change the rules of the House of Representatives midstream or not? If he does, that becomes the vote for the American people.
Yeah, I have to agree with Thomas Massie there. Look, I'm not a partisan guy. You guys know that. I have to agree with him when he says, hey, this is going to hurt Republicans in the midterms if they continue to stonewall this and cover this up. Certainly so. You're already seeing this chip away at Trump's approval ratings and his approval ratings by his own base. His base in particular doesn't like how he's handled this, and you can see him reacting to this issue in different ways than he reacted to dissension over his spending, rift with Musk or the war in Iran and all sorts of other issues that he has received criticism for, like rearming Ukraine. This he is trying to, get away from in any way he can. I talked about some of the methods he's tried to use, just say, I can't believe you're asking me about Epstein, to calling it a Democratic hoax, which is absurd, to, hey, releasing all these Russiagate docs, which I think some of those documents are meritorious and are worth considering. But it's not like anyone's going to be charged in Russiagate or in the Epstein case. They're not coming clean on this. And I do think that's going to tear away at the allure that MAGA has, even among his base. And you're seeing this play out in major polls. And you can say, hey, CNN and Rasmussen are rags. I don't agree with any of their polls. But even if you look at the disparity between issues and how Trump's supporters are responding to Trump's pursuit of those issues or his failures in those issues, it's clear that the Epstein story is hurting him more than anything else. So I'm with Kana and I'm with Massie at getting to the bottom of this. I don't care which political party this helps or hurts. It is about transparency and getting the truth out to the American public that's never gotten the truth, really, about any major circumstance such as this in their entire lifetime. This really could become the next JFK assassination, Gulf of Tonkin, all sorts of controversial things that lingered on, and Americans never got the truth on, if at all, until decades later. I think this could be one of those cases, and questions still remain in those cases too. But the Epstein story is one of cover-up. It's a bipartisan cover-up. It's systematic. It's not related to just one party, although right now it sure is Mike Johnson and Trump trying to shut this thing down. Look, we know that there is stuff that exists outside of the grand jury testimony. That was a red herring, and they likely pursued it because they knew that the judge would rule that they couldn't divulge this. They're sitting on evidence that was withheld from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial to the public. Wire transfer records, which Ron Wyden talks about. We know that there's search results information that came out of the search warrant that was served on Epstein's properties, in the plural, in 2019. And we also know that Epstein was an informant twice for the federal government. First, at the end of the Towers financial collapse, when he worked with Stephen Hoffenberg to swindle Americans and create what led to be one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history. Now, Epstein cooperated with the feds to divulge the dirt on that, but Hoffenberg, to his death, said that Epstein was the main architect of that. We also know from the first sweetheart deal that I think he got in that plea bargain, I think it was 2008, he agreed, and the documents in this that have been made public show that he was required to give the feds information about his criminal activities as part of that plea. And we haven't seen anything about that. I don't think we ever will. So yeah, I'm with these two. Get to the bottom of it. I don't care if it hurts Republicans. I don't care if it hurts Democrats. I don't care if it helps Republicans. I don't care if it helps Democrats. This is a child sex trafficking ring that was likely part of a blackmail operation from another government's foreign intelligence agency. So that's where we're left with. Let me know from you down below. Do you think that this will pass? Do you think that this has enough support in the House of Representatives and in the Senate to get through? Do you think that this cover-up will continue, or that Trump can actually get away from this and get to other stories and that Americans will forget? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please also consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. Become a member and I'm going to give you access to all of my videos before they release to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.